Samuel Hayes believed he'd seen the worst humanity could inflict during the war, yet nothing could have readied him for the sight that gripped his fence on that chilly Wyoming dawn. The burn marks along her wrist told a tale he was unwilling to accept. A 16-year-old girl lay limp, abandoned like discarded livestock on the edge of his land. Her dress was shredded, her lips cracked from thirst, and the first morning frost had set in on her dark hair. Samuel knelt beside her, his worn hands trembling as he sliced through the rope. He had spent 20 years living in solitude on this ranch. And now, this. As the restraints loosened, the girl stirred, her eyes snapping open with the raw terror of a cornered beast. She scrambled backward, her voice pleading, "Don't touch me!" Yet Samuel had already seen the bruises on her arms and the way she favored her left side. Someone had inflicted harm upon this child before abandoning her. His jaw clenched as he recognized the familiar signs he'd long tried to suppress from his own upbringing. "Easy now," he said, keeping his distance. "I'm not going to hurt you." She read his face, testing for deceit. Samuel Hayes, a large man hardened by 2 decades of ranch work, managed to calm her with a look in his gray eyes. She did not flee. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma," she answered, the word sounding like a confession. Samuel glanced at the rope still in his hands, then at the wheel ruts leading away from his fence. Someone had driven her there in the dead of night and abandoned her to perish. In Wyoming, that signaled wolves, the cold or worse. "Who did this to you?" Emma's face went blank. It was not confusion from memory loss, but the deliberate emptiness of someone who had remembered too much. "My father," she whispered. The words struck Samuel like a physical blow. He had spent 20 years dodging memories of his own father, only for them to confront him through this girl's haunted eyes. Samuel rose slowly, his mind racing. He could escort her to town, hand her over to the sheriff. That would seem the sensible, safest choice. But Sheriff Morrison was a corporate man who asked few questions about family matters, and Emma would likely return to whoever had harmed her. Or worse still. "Can you walk?" he inquired. Emma nodded, struggling to her feet. Samuel watched her, noting how she braced herself as if expecting another blow, then made up his decision. "Come on, then, let's get you inside." As they approached his cabin, Samuel spotted dust clouds on the horizon. Someone was moving fast, and something warned him that they didn't bring good news. Though the dust was miles away, Samuel had learned to read the prairie as others read books. 3 riders hurried along, purpose palpable. He had only about 20 minutes before they reached his property. Inside the cabin, Emma sat rigid at his kitchen table, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. Samuel filled a tin cup with water from his pitcher and placed it in front of her. "Take your time to drink," he advised. She complied, yet her trembling hands caused the cup to clatter against her teeth. For the first decade after his escape from home, Samuel had witnessed that fear reflected in his mirror each morning. "Those riders are on their way," he murmured. "Do they have any tie to you?" Emma paused midway as the cup hovered above her lips. The expression that crossed her face revealed all he required to know. "He's coming back for me," she whispered. Samuel drifted to the window and examined the incoming dust swirl. "Your father says I was owed for his debts," he remarked. Emma's tone was barely perceptible. Yet he altered his stance. He remarked that I wasn't worth enough. He claimed I'd bring dishonor to whoever claimed me. The words struck Samuel as hard as stones. He recalled his father's slurred voice, murky with whiskey, as he explained children as burdens that savvy men discard. Thus he imprisoned you in my fence to die." Emma gave a nod. She said the wolves would rectify his blunder. A chill settled over him in his chest. Not dread, but the familiar heft of a choice that would alter everything. He had dedicated 2 decades to sidestep this sort of trouble, keeping his head bowed and his work his own. Yet staring at Emma and seeing his own youth reflected in her frightened gaze, he realized he was finished fleeing. "Well," he murmured, glancing at the rifle propped above the hearth. "Seems your father misjudged," he added. Emma rose so abruptly that her chair toppled. "You can't grasp it. He's not solitary. He owes debts to perilous men, and they're joining him." Samuel drifted away from the window. "What a peril!" "Those who scorch farms without seeking answers." The haze drew nearer. Samuel could discern discreet riders. 3 men rode with vigor, and one hauled a rope, tugging something behind his horse. His blood turned icy. It served as a warning to him. They had slaughtered his livestock, towing the carcass as a warning. "They want you to understand what befalls those who meddle," Emma observed, reading his glance. Samuel sauntered to his gun rack and retrieved a Winchester. 2 decades of tranquility on this ranch. And now it failed because he could not abandon a distressed child. Yet while he loaded the firearm, Samuel discovered something that astonished him. For the first time in 20 years, he sensed himself anew. "Emma," he said with a steady tone, "do you know how to shoot?" She shook her head. "Then you'll soon learn." The trio halted just beyond handgun distance, close enough for him to see their visages, yet distant enough to evade his bullets. Skilled men, versed in such affairs. The man at the center was stocky, silvered hair in garments that had endured too many saloons. He must be Emma's father. The other 2 were younger, tougher, with the icy gaze of killers for profit. "Hayes!" the eldest shouted. "Rate limit exceeded. Please join. https://discord.gg9g5wkvtn8. Rate limit exceeded. Please join. https://discord.gg9g5wkvtn8. Samuel lifted his rifle and inspected the ammunition. "I'm feeling it's time to stop running," he said. Samuel returned to the porch. The rifle was ready. The time had run out, and the trio of riders were already drawing nearer, their hooves thudding on the compacted earth, he observed. "Time's up, Hayes," Thomas Garrett shouted. "Hand her over, and we'll ride away peacefully." "I can't do that," Samuel answered. His voice carried across the space between them. The frontmost gunman, a slender man with vacant eyes, urged his horse forward. "Then you've made the wrong choice." Yet before anyone could unsheathe a weapon, the neighs of approaching horses rang from the ridge behind Samuel's cabin. More riders, at least 6, barreling toward the standoff. Thomas Garrett's complexion went pallid. He was not meant to appear personally. Samuel's blood ran cold when he saw the man at the front of the new group. Marcus Devlin rode like a monarch surveying his realm, surrounded by armed men who had earned their fame through blood. Devlin seemed older than Samuel anticipated, perhaps 50, with silver hair and costly attire that seemed out of place amid the Wyoming wilderness. "Well, well," Devlin remarked as his horse crept softly past the dead cattle. "What do we have here?" Thomas Garrett's voice cracked. "Mr. Devlin, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, Thomas, but first I'd like to hear from Mr. Hayes." Devlin's pallid eyes fixed on Samuel. "I understand you have something that belongs to me." Samuel kept his rifle pointed at the original trio, yet he painfully sensed Devlin's men dispersing behind him. 9 against 1 were impossible odds. "Nothing here belongs to you," Samuel said. Devlin smiled, but warmth was absent. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. You see, Thomas owed me a sizable sum, and the collateral for that debt is presently hidden in your cabin. Emma is not collateral. She is a human being. Emma, Devlin's voice sharpened. Is that what she's calling herself now? The way he said it made Samuel's skin crawl. This man didn't merely want Emma back as payment for a debt. There was something personal, something possessive in his tone. I think it's time we settled this properly, Devlin continued. Thomas, you lying snake. Did you really think you could let my daughter die and I wouldn't find out? The words rang like a thunderclap. Devlin knew Emma was his daughter. He had always known. Thomas Garrett's horse trembled nervously. She ain't worth the trouble, Mr. Devlin said. I was doing you a favor. Devlin's gun flashed into his hand so quickly that Samuel barely noticed the draw. The shot rang across the prairie as Thomas Garrett toppled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. Nobody asked you to think, Thomas. Samuel's mind raced. Devlin had just shot Emma's stepfather for attempting to kill her, but the cold calculation in his eyes declared, this wasn't mercy, it was ownership. Now then, Devlin said, holstering his weapon. Rat limit exceeded. Please join. https://discord.gg9g5wkvtn8s. Why is she so crucial at this moment? The quiet lingered so long that Samuel began to doubt whether he had gone too far. When Devlin finally spoke, his voice resonated with a gravity that clarified everything. Because she is the sole remaining member of my family. And because 16 years ago, pride prevented me from taking what rightfully belonged to me. His tone grew even more somber. I will not repeat that error again. Samuel felt a wave of nausea. This had nothing to do with money or commerce. It was about a man who had endured 16 years of remorse for abandoning his daughter, and now he desired total possession of her. Across the rocks behind the ridge, Emma's rifle popped once. A man let out a curse. Samuel also heard the unmistakable thud of a hard impact on the ground. 8 men departed. Yet as Samuel peered around the cabin's corner, he watched Devlin extract something from his saddlebags that sent chills down his spine. It was dynamite. Last chance, Hayes, Devlin shouted. If she doesn't come down, I'll blow those rocks to pieces with her inside. Samuel watched Devlin load the dynamite with steady hands, every motion precise and well-known. It was no bluff. He would destroy Emma rather than let herself be lost again. You have 1 minute to bring rationality into her haze. Devlin cried out as he lit the fuse. Then I will solve this problem permanently. Samuel faced the hardest decision his life had ever offered. He stepped out from behind the cabin, arms raised, rifle resting on the earth. He roared at Emma, pointing toward the rocks. Come down, from where she stands. Emma's voice rang clear and defiant. I'd rather die up here. No. Samuel's voice cracked with desperation. Listen to me. There is another way. The fuse on Devlin's dynamite burned steadily. Perhaps 30 seconds remained. Samuel's mind spun through every possibility, each angle, any chance of saving the girl who had taught him what it means to guard someone more vulnerable. Then he noticed it. The one thing Devlin had overlooked. Samuel shouted at Devlin. If you throw that dynamite, you'll never learn the truth about what Thomas did to her. The fuse continued to burn, yet Devlin's eyes hardened. What truth? Why do you think Thomas was so keen to get rid of her? What do you think he has done to your daughter over the last 6 years? Samuel watched how Devlin's face softened into understanding, then genuine horror. The man's hand reached for the dynamite, but he was too late to yank the fuse. Time seemed to crawl. Samuel dashed toward Devlin, leaping at him as he attempted to toss the dynamite clear of the rocks. They collided in a tangle of limbs. The lit stick flew from Devlin's grasp. The blast shook the ground, yet it detonated harmlessly in the open prairie, showering dirt and debris over everyone. When the dust cleared, Samuel stared at Devlin's gun barrel, but Devlin's eyes were no longer on him. They were fixed on Thomas Garrett, who was crawling through the dirt, his wounded shoulder in hand. Devlin whispered, "Thomas." His tone chillingly calm. "Come here." The next moments unfolded with speed and violence. Thomas Garrett met his end, aware of the cause, while Devlin's remaining men observed their leader carry out the execution with stark indifference. Yet after it finished, Devlin stunned all present. He glanced toward the crags where Emma lingered and shouted in a tone that caught Samuel off guard. "Emma, I'm sorry." Those words drifted across the prairie as if praying. "I won't come down," Emma screamed in reply. "I know," Devlin answered. "And I'm not asking you to come." He mounted his horse, gathered its reins, and looked older than he had an hour earlier. "Hayes," he murmured softly, telling that she was unsafe while he lived. "Men like me never change," he observed, "but men like you can." He dug into his coat, drew a heavy envelope, and tossed it to Samuel. Inside lay enough cash to take her far away from this place. "Start over somewhere." "I'll never find you." "Why?" Samuel inquired. Devlin glanced at the rocks once more. "Because 16 years passed, I failed to be your father. Today, though, you succeeded." He departed on his horse with the others, leaving Samuel in silence with the burden of an unthinkable gift. An hour later, Emma descended from the crags. They interred Thomas Garrett with no ceremony and gathered their modest belongings. As the sun set, they rode toward Colorado, toward a future neither of them had dared envision that early in the day. Behind them, the Wyoming prairie unfolded empty and immense, keeping its secrets as dusk fell. If this story touched you, give it a like and tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were in their shoes? Subscribe to Frontier Stories and join us as we continue to tell stories of hope, resilience, and the beautiful, messy truth of Wild West.